Cliches are shop worn, but also true, Harlan. The cliche is fact is stranger than fiction. For you in this particular endeavor, it's very meaningful.
Yeah, it's a strange, but it's obviously true. Fact is stranger than fiction. In these stories that we're doing on Final Twist, if I had written them in a novel and you had read that novel, Major, you'd be throwing the book in my head saying, this is so unrealistic. There's no way this can possibly be. These twists and turns make no sense. Fiction has to follow certain rules, but reality doesn't. So these stories are actually crazier in many ways. And they're twists and turns that I, who normally can spot them a million miles away, never see coming because it's real.
Because human beings are more varied, more interesting, more complex, and also more banal and more predictable than something you might invent.
I think that's right. I think it's part of the human condition. We also put ourselves in the boat. So I'll always get, not nasty necessarily emails, but I have a show right now on Netflix called Runaway, for example. And I'll get, oh, wait, this couldn't happen, that couldn't happen. But believe me, nothing that I've ever written in any novel is as strange as the stories that we're telling on this TV show. And these are all real. You have that gravitas when it's reality, where you can't say, oh, that couldn't happen. It did happen.
And you mentioned the word show. Is there a showy part to this telling, or is this a victim-based, try to elevate their voice, their agency, their story element?
I think it's both. I think it's more the latter. I think if you're telling the best story that you can, this is true crime. And so there are real victims. But if I'm telling the best story I can, it has to not only stir your mind and stir your pulse, make you lean forward because you want to know that next twist, but it has to stir your heart. And it was really important to me that, with Final Twist, my name's on it. Harlan Coben's Final Twist, that we give voice and agency to the victims and the families. I think it's an important part of it. But strangely enough, it also strengthens the story because if you care about the people, you're going to care about the story that much more. So one doesn't have to preclude the other.
When I started my career, Harlan, I was a police reporter in Amarillo, Texas, then Las Vegas, Nevada, and briefly in Houston, Texas. And one of the more challenging parts of that job was to deal face-to-face with victims very soon after something tragic happened to them, either accidentally or as a result of a crime. And that human connection in that moment is something you never forget. In these cases, you're a bit removed from that, but I'm sure some of that visceral emotion comes to you.
Well, it does. The first episode is called Billy and Billy. It's about a young couple. His name is Billy. Her name is Billie Jean. And they're found murdered in their home, and their baby's there, alive, thank goodness. But the baby's left there at home in Tennessee. And then when you start getting into the details, is it a CIA agent? Is it a social media post? What is it? And that's a different question. But if you don't feel for these people, this story is not one that I would want to tell. And it's deeply moving. It's deeply affecting. And I hope, it was really important to me, that we give these people a voice and that you get to know, by the end of this show, I think you will know Billy and you'll know Billie Jean and you'll know their family and friends. You'll know the police officers involved. We try not to have too much narration. I step in and will help lead it along a little bit, but we don't have a narrator's voice. We wanted the people involved to tell the story for this show.
And in this endeavor, are you a clinician of crime? Are you a clinician of the justice system? Are you a clinician of law enforcement techniques? What are you trying to achieve?
I think it's all the above. I think one of the things that I don't think I'm guilty of it, frankly, as a fiction writer, but a lot are, is we've made police work seem really sort of simple. And, they go into a crime scene now and they find a hair and they capture the killer. And that's not what happens. And so you're really able to see the human mistakes, the frailty of our system, both in terms of law enforcement, in terms of legalese, in terms of the justice system, as well as, what the families kind of go through. Some of these stories, we have a number of different episodes, but some of them, it took over 20 years to solve the crime. That's not that uncommon. We again think today it's very, very easy. How come the cops don't just do this and they can't just check the ring camera, blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot of complexity to it. And I hope we're also showing that. There's a lot of things I kind of want out of this show. I mean, it's called Final Twist because the shows do have a final twist. When you find out what happened to Billy and Billy, your jaw's going to drop. It's just ridiculous, incredible. But these are also real people, and you have to reflect that as well. So it's a balancing act that I hope we're accomplishing.
And as I understand it, Harlan, all of the stories you tell in Final Twist are closed. There are no
Yeah.
cliffhangers.
I did not want, I do some cliffhangers in my TV shows, though hopefully if you watch, for example, Runaway 8 episodes, by the end you get the answer. That's what I always want to do. I don't believe that people should have to wait another season fictionally to wait for another answer. And here, each case is separate, its own thing, and it's solved. We do not want ones that were open-ended. So, the show will open up with the crime. It'll twist one way. You'll think it's that person. You'll think it's this person. And then boom, you'll find out at the end who did it. But yes, everything is completely contained. Everything is a closed story. I did not want to have that aspect where it's open and we're trying to solve the case. No, these are all solved cases.
You are no doubt aware of our cultural fascination with true crime. What do you think that is about at its essence?
I don't know. I think that I think crime in general has always been something that fascinates. On a fiction level, even on a nonfiction level, if I ask people to name their favorite 5 books that are 100 years old, I guarantee you 4 out of 5, probably all 5, will have a crime in it. Dostoevsky, Hugo, Shakespeare, whatever. They'll have a crime in it. So it's not really a new thing that we are fascinated by crime. But it's really the human condition, and what we love about storytelling is people that are put under tremendous pressure. And I think that's what this does. I think the added bonus maybe of true crime is it actually happened. And so maybe you can learn something from it. Maybe you could find out something about human nature from it, both from the victim's viewpoint, the killer's viewpoint, the cop's viewpoint, the family's viewpoint, the friend's viewpoint. All of these things, I think, combine to make it sort of fascinating. A lot of times the cops in some of these stories are really trying their best, but they just mess up, or they really they're more limited than you think. Other cases, they're not. Some cases, the cops are not. So all of these different things, I think we find fascinating, and it gives us maybe a little bit of a safe distance. So because it's not happening to us, but it could.
I want to go back to what you said about this first episode of Final Twist. You said if you had written that, and I want to put it in the context of you send it in to your editor. What you're telling me is you would have gotten angry notes back about the improbability of that story, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the first story, the Billy and Billy story, the final solution is bonkers. I mean, it's tragic and horrible, but it's also just bonkers. You're not going to believe it. And if I had written it in fiction, I think you would say, oh, no, there's no way that would have happened. Someone would have stepped in here. This would have happened here. And I understand that complaint. I get that a lot as a fiction writer. But this actually happened, so you can't say that here. But it's really insane. I mean, I don't think as a novelist, no, I definitely would not have been able to get away with it. I would have had to have changed some detail. And we've seen this a lot with this proliferation of true crime or documentaries, where we watch it and we go, this is crazy. This couldn't really actually happen in real life. But that's why you make it true crime, because they couldn't get away with it. I also, when we made this show, I'm working with some top level documentary filmmakers. They made 11 Minutes in Las Vegas. That was recently on. They made Favela Rising, the 2 Escobars, Skywalkers. These are top quality people. We wanted to tell the story in a very fast way. It's 1 hour of TV, but in a quality way so that it's not overly sensationalized or any of that sort of thing. There has to be salacious aspects. That's the thing with murder, but to show the respect. And also, I think it's more interesting when you don't need to gin it up, so to speak.
Meaning you don't want to feel anyone watching this has a sense that this story or those human beings at the center of it have in any way been exploited.
Yeah, of course. I don't need to. I don't think it would be a terrible thing to do anyway. Um, and I know, the families that have been involved have been appreciative. I think giving their dead ones a little bit of a voice, a little bit of an agency, able to tell their tragic stories. But I hope you come away each episode feeling that. At the end, it's devastating what happened here. This is not easy. This is not easy, and I don't want you to walk away thinking it's easy. I don't want to do that in my fiction either, quite frankly. I don't want to just be I'm not doing sort of the puzzle mystery and the body doesn't matter. People are hurt in my books, and there's devastation that goes on. And I think part of the experience for you is to actually feel and experience that, to understand empathy. That's how we gain empathy, is by feeling these things for other people.
That leads me to two questions, Harlan. Was this more challenging emotionally for you, the reality of it, than you anticipated? And will it make you a better fiction writer?
First one, yes. And anything I try to do in this stage of life, frankly, I'm trying to still increase empathy, and in society too. I just think it's one of our biggest issues, and that's maybe a larger question about what social media has done and what things have done to our society in general that makes us just less empathetic. I think the fact that we don't read as much is another issue. So that was really important to me, and it was hard because, right, when I'm writing a novel, I'm playing God with fictional creatures that I've created. I can do what I want with them. They don't really exist. I understand that. And here, yes, at every stage, I was like, are we being both truthful and are we being sensitive? Both. It had to be both. You can't just, you don't want to be fake in any way, shape, or form. These are real people and they deserve that much attention. And I hope we were able to deliver that.
Will it make you a better fiction writer, this
Oh,
experience?
I skipped the second half of that question. I always hope every experience will make me a better fiction writer. Certainly the deaths in my own family, I often will credit in saying it's not a silver lining on the cloud, but losing my parents at a fairly young age and things like that when I was in my 20s, definitely make me a better writer. And I assume, though I haven't yet written fiction, now that this show's coming out, I'm going to starting again to see if that's going to leak into the writing. I don't really know until I start writing, but I do think, I look at true crime differently after I've, worked on Final Twist, no question about it.
I've heard you say that fiction has to follow some rules. What are they?
It has to feel real. There has to be an authenticity that you don't necessarily have to have in reality. I know that sounds so strange, but every time that I get a call or the show just came out on Netflix, so I will get a lot of messages, even though there's not plot holes of, oh, this would never have happened, that would never have happened. First of all, as we know, if you take 100 people, there's no two people have the same result or the same answer. Look at our voting patterns, look how we comment online, look how we just act. No person does always this or always that. So it has to feel more real than what goes on in reality, because I have the ultimate trump card here when you're sort of saying, oh, this could not have happened. Well, it did happen. So you can't really argue with that. In fiction, you can make that argument that this would never have happened.
When you were young, before you were published, was this your dream?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I call it incremental ambition. I mean, my dream has come true in ways that I would have never imagined. When I first started to write a novel, my goal, this is back, in the 1980s, was, oh man, if I could just have one novel published, if I could just one day walk into a store and see my novel on shelf, that's it. That's all I want. Okay, two novels, just to show it wasn't a fluke. Can I just do two novels? Okay, can I just scratch out an embarrassing living? Like really, okay, if I could just for 1 week skim number 15 out of 15 on the New York Times list, just for one moment. Okay, if I could do it again, if I could hit the top 10, if I could hit the top 5, if I could hit one, if I could have all of these have always been for me, which is a smart way of being, by the way. I recommend this incremental ambition so you can enjoy that moment while you look forward to the next. But if somebody had told me when I was first starting out that I would be here talking to Major Garrett with having the #1 show right now on Netflix, Runaway, and hosting a CBS TV series called Harlan Coben's Final Twist, which will be on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m., I would have laughed in your face and said, that's beyond anything I would have the chutzpah to imagine back in my youth.
Which writers, when you were young, inspired you?
It's an interesting question. I'm also, I'm not really, well, I guess I am inspired, but I'm not really as influenced anymore. I was talking to somebody who was reading a book recently, and I said, oh my God, I'm trying to write a book, and I read this book, and it was so great it paralyzed me. Now I can't write. And for me, it's the opposite. I love that moment. If I read somebody who's so good, first of all, I say two things to myself. I say, one, I'm not meant to write this book. I just wasn't. I'm not this guy. Every person is meant to write their own particular book. So I'm not meant to. Two, if I had written it, I wouldn't be having this wonderful experience that I'm enjoying it so much. What's better than a great book? And three, the inspiration for me is I want to raise my game so I can make my reader feel what I'm feeling now. So rather than being sort of inspired or influenced by, or being intimidated by at this stage of my game, I tell the people who are trying to write, try to be inspired, try to have that make you up your game and enjoy it, because I don't know any writer who doesn't read a lot. I don't know any musician who doesn't listen to and appreciate music.
If you think back to police procedurals of TV fame, any stick with you, resonate, click with you when you were young, or even to this day, that are from a bygone era?
Yeah, first of all, I don't, I'm not a procedural guy. I don't really, not that interested in my novels and necessarily getting everything exactly right. I'm more interested in telling a story. There's guys who
That's
do
just a
great
TV
police procedures.
terminology for a show like Columbo or Policewoman or Rockford
Yes.
Files or something. You know, they're procedurals. That's what they call in the trade.
Yes, yeah, right. No, so Columbo was one I would definitely say was still. By the way, if you capture it when you're flipping around and you see Robert Culp being a villain, stop and watch.
It's a great show. I've seen
Jack
those episodes,
Cassidy,
yes.
or Jack Cassidy being, stop and watch. That show is brilliant in its in what it does, and in the twists and turns that it takes, and from the beginning who did it. What an original idea too, to not have the detective show up for the first half hour of the show, which is just brilliant. So I still put Columbo as maybe the greatest crime show of all time. I loved Hill Street Blues when it first came out, and they showed the inner workings of a police station. I can still remember when that debuted on Thursday night, it's on NBC or whatever. I loved that show when I was a kid. And I love Mannix, even though they were goofy, those kind of old Private Eye shows that we grew up with. But those are a couple that stick out in my mind. I'm forgetting a few. Veronica Mars, a more recent one about a young girl, high school girl detective, was really, really well done. I like the first season of True Detective. I like Fargo now. That's another show that I think does it very well. I don't know if I would call those more policey procedural stuff than that, but those are some of my favorites.
Because they all are, in the end, Harlan, a puzzle. And life is about putting together puzzles.
It's certainly, I mean, I love suspense. It's why I have people like vanish in all of my books, for example. Are they alive? Are they dead? Can I be made whole? That's just compelling stuff. So that's my milieu. I think also because of the people that I lost at a young age, and the wish that wouldn't it be great if they were still alive? A wish that many of us have for people who have left us. And so I find that really compelling. A puzzle, yes. My problem with the word puzzle is it seems to indicate something a little colder. It seems to indicate something a little bit more intellectual. It's not also like if I'm making a 1,000-piece puzzle of the Mona Lisa and I'm on piece 999, it's not like I stick the last piece in and go, oh my God, it's the Mona Lisa. I had no idea. You should know by now. It's also it's on the box. So I'm not a huge fan of the puzzle.
Right.
To me, it's more like a camera coming into focus, and you sort of see long, dark hair, right? And you go, oh, it's long, dark. Oh, I think it's Cher. And then as it gets to the last focus, you see it's Howard Stern. And you should have known it was Howard Stern from right at the beginning, right? That's what it is. It's like that last twist when we finally get fully into focus that we see the truth. I like that analogy better myself than the puzzle, which is a little colder to me, a little more analytical. What I like to do anyway.
Well spoken and well reasoned, and I appreciate that very much. In your pantheon, is there room for In Cold Blood?
You mean meaning that? Yeah.
The book, Truman
Do
Capote's
I
book.
want to? Yeah. Have I haven't look. I keep saying I'm never going to do something, and then I do something. I said I would never collaborate on a novel. I've done my 37th novel. I ended up collaborating with Reese Witherspoon. I would never host a true crime show. Why would I be
Right.
interested in that? Doing that? Why would I do Netflix? Whatever it is. So right now, I would say no. I wouldn't have an interest in writing a true crime story, but my new book that I'm working on now is sort of a mix between a writer's guide and a memoir. And I never thought I would do that either. So I'm stopping saying never. And if I find a story that would interest me and you would get it, I have to be obsessed with whatever I'm doing. I have to be totally obsessed and passionate about it. If I find one that fits that criteria where I can tell it in a different and interesting way, then yeah, maybe I would.
Let me rephrase that because I think I confused you. In your pantheon of great books, whether they're true crime or not, is there room for Truman Capote's In Cold Blood?
I would not say I would list it as one of my absolute favorite books. I'm not. I'm mostly a fiction reader. Most of my favorite books or experiences are novels. So I wouldn't put that in there. I think it's a brilliant book. I read it many, many years ago, but it wouldn't be in my top 10 list. Let's put it that way.
I want to go back to what you said a moment ago about incremental ambition. Let my audience know why you think that's a really useful tool for success, and is part of what you believe is successful about it or useful about it is that it doesn't lead to a sense of I'm falling behind before you're even falling behind?
It's definitely that also. I mean, first of all, to start off and hope that you're going to be a #1 New York Times bestseller, it's like saying, I'm going to be an NBA pro basketball player. It's very, very unlikely to happen. It takes a lot of different things. And it could be a distant goal. First of all, whatever makes you right, that's how I live my life. If it makes me right, good. If it doesn't make me right, bad. So if those kind of goals work for you, they don't work for me. I need to see the goal. That's how. And also, it gives me a moment to stop and appreciate and smell the flowers. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're writing a successful book and it came out and now you're like, well, it only hit 15 on the list. My goal is 1. I'm not happy yet. That's ridiculous and moronic. And so we should be celebrating while looking ahead. You finished climbing one mountain and you're really appreciative that you reached that mountain and you're exhausted and you don't want to climb a mountain again. But then in distance, maybe you see a taller mountain and you're thinking, maybe next time I'm going to try to get there. So part of it is also just an appreciation for life and what you have and being grateful and all the steps. The other thing, Major, and this is sort of funny, is when I started out, we didn't know as much as people know today. So like my first novels, I wrote a series about a guy named Myron Bolitar. They were paperback originals. I got paid $5,000 for the first, and not to brag on the air, but by the time my fourth came out, I was making $6,000 a book. So I was an overnight success, Major, as you can tell. But the funny thing is, because there was no Amazon rankings or anything like that, I didn't realize what a pimple on the ass of publishing I was. I thought I was the cat's pajamas. I had a published novel out with Dell Press. That's big time. I'd walk into a small bookstore. They might have 2 copies of it. I wouldn't realize how, small. Now I'd be able to look on Instagram and see, or, on Instagram, on Amazon, see them ranked 3,758,000.
Where my books are.
So I think there's something to that naivete that I was just, even back then when I would finish a novel, before it even came out, I'd be sure to be starting on the next novel and thinking, whatever happens to this one, if it flames out or if it does well, I'm ready. Because the only thing you can control in this business is what I actually write or work on, right? In other words, people will say to me, oh, do you like ebooks? Do you like online? What about chain bookstores? And if I was that smart, I'd be a businessman. I stick my fingers in my ears like, I can't hear you. The only thing I can control is how good my book is. And if my book is good enough, you'll read it on stone tablets. So just focus on what you can do, which is your work. I never wanted to be a publisher or a marketer or an Instagram influencer. So that aspect of the business, which may be naive for me to say, but I'm a little older, so I can, and I'm already established, I can try to ignore.
Do you have a process? And if so, would you be willing to share it?
Sure, but it's interesting. because I'm this book I'm writing, I've been thinking a lot about this. Most of my writer friends that I've talked to have offices, like real office they go to. Everyone's a little different. If you ask 10 writers how they do it, you get 11 different answers. But like, John Grisham has a cottage behind his house. It has no internet. He gets there at the same time every day, et cetera. I'm a serial routinist. I keep changing up my routine. I do whatever works until it stops working, and then I find a new routine. For years, because I had 4 kids, I had to leave my house to write. You'll find any excuse if you stay home. You'll find any excuse not to write. I'll be like, I'm going to write, but first, I need to wood panel the basement. Let me go downstairs and wood panel. You'll find any excuse. Major, you're a writer.
Yep.
You'll find any excuse not to write. So I would leave the house. The story I often tell is one day, about 10 or 15 years ago, when they first started, I took an Uber into New York City from my home in New Jersey. And of course, I felt guilty and was trying to justify the expense. And I'm, sitting in the back saying, well, by the time I pay for parking and tolls, And I took my pad out and my paper and my pen, and I started to write, and I wrote really well. So for 3 weeks, I took Ubers all day long until I finished a book called The Stranger in the back of an Uber. Thank goodness that stopped, because it was costing me a lot of money. But I use up places, certain coffee shops. I had one where I was working at a Stop and Shop. They had a table near the deli counter, I think, so people could buy a sandwich and just sit there. No one ever used it, so I sat there like all day, coming home smelling like olive oil. But for a couple of months, that worked. And then it stopped working, and I had to find someplace else.
God, I love that. I love what you just said. That's fantastic.
My process is to keep changing. I live by a very simple credo. If it produces pages, good. If it doesn't produce pages, bad. If it means waking up early to do it, staying up late, doing it lunchtime, whatever it takes, I need to produce pages for life balance.
Do you have a daily allotment of pages before you stop?
No.
Okay.
I know a lot of writers do, and I don't.
A lot of writers do,
and I recommend it. A lot of writers do. I don't. I've never had that. I'm also a streak writer. So if my book ends up being 400 pages, and let's say it takes about 9 months, usually around the 8-month mark, I'll be around the halfway part, 200 pages. I'll write the last 200 pages in a month, usually the last 100 pages in a week, usually the last 40 pages in one day. It's not a pretty day. You don't want to hang with me that day, Major. Trust me, you don't want to be anywhere near me. But I'm a streak writer that way, because I've been seeing the ending for so long in my head that when I finally get there, I just do it. So I'm not one who needs to say I did 1,000 words a day or any of that. But I get the idea. Think of it. If you're listening to us right now, if you start today and you write 1 page a day, end of the year, you'll be pretty close to have a done book. Only 1 page a day.
Right.
It's not a lot.
Harlan, that absolutely blows my mind. You finish sprinting toward the end.
Yeah. Yep. I see that, man. And it never needs that much changing. It's weird. It's just, I've been thinking about it. I know the endings when I start. So a lot of people don't. I know the beginning and the end. I don't know the middle. But by the time I'm at that stage where I can see it, I can't really sleep. I can't really eat. I can't do anything until I get there, because it's just on my mind. I have to get it out. My wife once compared it to childbirth. When you're 9 months section, like, and you get to the hospital, you just want the dang thing out. It's like that. It's sitting there, it's crowning, it's got to come out.
And I'm going to guess, Harlan, that there is a decoupling of your exhilaration mentally and your physical exhaustion.
Yeah. I feel a little bit like a boxer at the end of the 15th round. Like, I've thrown every punch I can. If I've come up with a clever idea while I'm writing it, it somehow has worked its way into the book. I got nothing left. I can't even raise a hand. I'm like, there will be no rematch, Howard. It's just my arms are at my side. I know you're getting that reference, Major. I don't know how many other people out there are getting it, but I can't move. I'm exhausted. I've given it everything that I have, and I've poured into those pages. And when I type the end, it is exhilarating and exhausting. Just like, I guess, I imagine it's what it's like at the end of a fight, or I've spoken to some friends of mine who are rock stars, and it's how they feel after they do one of those concerts that go on for 3 hours and they're spent.
A couple things before I let you go. Other than writing, what are things, hobbies or interests that turn your crank, bring you happiness?
This is both my problem and my good thing. Good point. Other than family, not much. This is my hobby as well. Like, we both probably have friends who like to paint or whatever else. my work is creation and creating. And so I do it a lot because I don't really have anything else. Like I have no other real, like I don't want to antique. I don't want to collect carpets. I don't know what people do. I don't really, none of that really interests me. I have my friends.
Oh, come on. You
I
want to
took
learn
up
to make
golf with a
sourdough
number of
bread. I know it, Harlan.
yeah, I don't do any of that. I mean, I do a golf. Why I didn't smash a glass and jam it in my eye, I don't know. Instead, I took up golf, which is a terrible thing to do. But even while I'm playing, there's always a voice in my head that says you should be home writing. Usually it's somebody almost hit with my Aaron tee shot. But so I don't really have a lot of interests other than that. It's important. I'll just say one quick thing about this. Life is about balance, right? So it's your relationship with your spouse or your partner, your kids. It's about exercise and eating healthy and doing all of those things. All of those things could be going well for me. But if I'm not writing well, it's all going to get out of balance.
Right.
So even like if I'm on vacation, which I just was, away with my family, I like to wake up an hour or two earlier than everybody else and just write a little bit so I maintain that balance in my life. And if you try to do that, make it some kind of positive like that, like some people will meditate or whatever, it helps you produce pages as well.
Last thing, you knew the famous author Dan Brown when he was young. You knew eventual New Jersey Governor Chris Christie when he was young. Who was more interesting at that time?
Oh man, you're getting me in trouble with both.
I saved the crusher for last, Harlan. I always save the crusher for last.
Neither one of them's all that interesting. No, they're both actually really, I mean, they're both really great companions. I mean, I think that doesn't surprise people who have heard either one of them talk. They're both really funny, and they're both deep and insightful. And I will say this.
Did you see
about my
potential in them when they were young?
Yes, I will definitely see. Chris, I've known Chris since we were 10 years old and played Little League Baseball together. His father was our coach. And my senior year of high school, I was president of the student council and Chris was president of the senior class. And you would definitely have guessed which one of us would eventually be governor and which one of us would make up stuff for a living. Though I might say he does both, but I'm bum-ching. But you would definitely have guessed which one of us. There's no. I mean, if I was in a class of 600 people in our high school class, and if you asked any of them which one of us would have ended up being governor, you would have guessed Chris Christie. So
what about Dan Brown?
Same. I mean, Dan was always so creative that none of that surprised me. He always saw things from sort of a different angle. He was one of those guys who always had like an interesting insight where you go, hey, I didn't really think of it that way. So it doesn't surprise me. Dan sent me, before he was a known writer, he sent me a copy of a manuscript and he says, would you read this? And if you like it, maybe give it one of those blurbs. And I did, and I loved it, and I gave it a blurb, and it was called Da Vinci Code. And the next 2 years, my book was #2 behind it. And I said, Dan, I'm going to stop recommending your book now. He's still a good friend. He's still, I see Dan, a fair amount. We still try to golf together. In different spots, and he's always but again, neither one of them are ever superficial conversation. It's a never how's the weather conversation. You can immediately go deep with them.
Going deep with you was one of the great pleasures of 2026. It's a young year, but I'm doubtful it's going to get much better than that for me. Harlan,
I'm one of your top 10 guests in
January. No false modesty will be accepted. No false modesty and humble bragging will be accepted. You're near the top and will remain so all year. Harlan, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
A lot of fun. Thank you.